saint from Italy, with a role in the Swedish context as a bearer of light in the dark Swedish winters. Saint, and I think if there is one thing with the role associated in the Swedish context as a bearer of light in the dark Swedish winters. Saint, and I think if there is me light symbolizes both the Swedish context as a bearer of light in the dark must be light in times. Saint, and I think if there is me light symbolizes both the Swedish context as a bearer of light in the dark must be light in times. And I think if there is me light symbolizes both the Swedish context as a bearer of light, I feel very humbled when I read the motivation. And I think if there is me light symbolizes both the Swedish context as a bearer of light, I feel very humbled when I read the motivation. And I think if there is me light symbolizes efforts of desire of light, I am very humble when I realize it. And I think if there is me light symbolizes efforts of desire of light, I am very humble when I realize it. And I think if there is me light symbolizes efforts of desire of light, I am very humble when I realize it. And I think if there is me light symbolizes efforts of desire of light, I am very humble when I realize it. And I think if there is me light symbolizes efforts of desire of light, I am very humble when I realize it. And I think if there is me light symbolizes efforts of desire of light, I am very humble when I realize it. And I think if there is me light symbolizes signal. In that sense, I proudly accept this award not only for myself, but on behalf of all leaders of democratically elected parliaments. Winston Churchill once said, "I am a child of the House of Commons." I think this is a beautiful way of underscoring the importance of parliaments, also for the executive branch. Parliaments are at the heart of democracy. The Swedish constitution states that the parliament is the foremost representative of the people in our democracy. Of course, in democratic countries, also governments and presidents have democratic legitimacy, but there is a special bond between the parliament and the people, forged not least through direct elections. Secondly, I believe that democracy is a prerequisite for lasting global peace and security. Many of the tensions and conflicts we can see in the world today, within countries and between countries, originate from a lack of democracy, a lack of respect for freedom of speech, for minority rights, for rule of law, and for other fundamental parts of a democratic society. From that perspective, I think by giving the leader of a parliament your award, you recognize the importance parliaments have for democracy and the importance democracy has for global peace and security. For this, I truly commend you. And the importance democracy has. Moving on to the specific events you allude to in the motivation, we have in Sweden experienced an electoral period like no other. When a prime minister resigns and a new government is formed, it is in Sweden the task of the speaker, not as in most other countries, the head of state, to prepare a proposal for a new prime minister who can gain sufficient support in the parliament. We have now had 3 such governmental formations since the last election in 2018, only 3 years ago. This electoral period started with a record-long process of formation of government in 2018 to 2019, which took a total of 134 days. This was followed by a government crisis in June to July this year, and then in November, I received the application from Prime Minister Stefan Löfven to be discharged from office. Thus, in November, we had the 3rd formation of government of this electoral period, and on the 30th of November, just a couple of weeks ago, a new government took office with Ms. Magdalena Andersson of the Social Democratic Party as Prime Minister. During these many twists and turns, I have worked hard to explain the processes to the Swedish people and demonstrate that the many formations of government have not worked hard to explain the processes to the Swedish people. Swedish democracy demonstrates that the many formations of government, all the actors taking part in these crises and use the various to the Swedish people available and demonstrate that the many formations of government, all the actors taking part in these crises and use the various to the Swedish people available and demonstrate that the many formations of government, all the actors in this I may not say in a partisan way, and I have tried my very best to be a neutral broker and representative of the parliament as an institution, not of any particular party. In order to maintain public trust in the political processes, I think it is important that there are representatives who are not embroiled in fights, but to try to calm the situation. And I am humbled and grateful that you, Governor Dukakis, and the Boston Global Forum have chosen to give me your award because of, among other things, these efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it is important when talking about democracy to take note of the fact that since around 1980, we witnessed a positive trend with more and more states moving from authoritarian to democratic rule. However, since a few years back, that positive trend has been reversed, and a larger proportion of citizens on this planet are now living in authoritarian countries. It is clear that the pandemic has accentuated this negative trend. It is alarming how leaders in different parts of the world are using the COVID-19 crisis for authoritarian purposes, such as silencing independent media and obstructing the ability of civil society to make its voice heard. All friends of democracy have to work hard and work even harder to try to counter this negative trend and to support democracy in every corner of the world. Sweden is very active on the global stage to promote peace, security, and democracy. And that is a joint effort by both the government and the parliament. We have for decades taken part in several UN peacekeeping missions. As you may know, it was under the leadership of the second Secretary General of the United Nations, the Swede Dag Hammarskjöld, who that the concept of UN peacekeeping mission was created. And we also promote democracy and peace and security through international aid, democracy projects, and in many other ways. So I think it is important for all countries, all democratic countries of the world, to enhance their efforts to promote a peaceful and democratic world. Ladies and gentlemen, turning to IE and digital, which I think the Boston Global Forum has discussed in such an important way throughout the years, throughout this year and several years. I believe that the pandemic has served as a catalyst for an accelerating digitalization. Digitalization and artificial intelligence, obviously, as we have already stated, raise questions that need to be addressed. When and how to share data and information is, for instance, a central question for all companies and government agencies working with data-driven methods. It is now more important than ever that we all work for technology that is trustworthy, secure, and human-centric. And I would like to mention a couple of examples of issues that are topical in Sweden and that concern rule of law and inclusivity in a time when more and more of the activities of our public agencies are being digitalized with or without the use of artificial intelligence specifically. So these are only a couple of examples. There is, of course, a wide range of examples that could be taken, but as on the theme of democracy and the interaction between citizens and governments, I have chosen these two examples. The Swedish National Audit Office has examined whether automated decision-making by government agencies is effective and efficient without jeopardizing legal certainty in decision-making. There have, for instance, been projects where citizens applying for social support from local councils, when those requests have been handled in an automated decision-making process. And that is one of the examples that have been scrutinized here. The overall conclusion is that automated decision-making by government agencies has led to increased effectiveness and efficiency, and that fundamental legal certainty aspects have improved to some extent. However, there are shortcomings in the agency's processing of cases with a high risk of fraud and error. In addition, there is far too limited follow-up of the correctness of automated decisions. There is therefore a risk that resources for manual control and follow-up have too frequently been accorded too low a priority. And I think this might be true also for several other areas, that it is important that we scrutinize in retrospect what has worked and what has not. And that learning process, I believe, has only just begun when it comes to AI and digitalization. Another audit from the Swedish National Audit Office shows that the accessibility of government agencies has deteriorated in non-digital channels, and that this might pose a risk when it comes to accessibility and ultimately to democracy or important democratic values. Digitalization of government agencies' activities contributes to more efficient and improved service for citizens. But for many people, being able to access services by phone or by visiting in person is still important, and that must not be forgotten. The audit shows that many public agencies have become less accessible in non-digital channels in the past 10 years. Agencies' customer contacts in digital channels have increased significantly, but despite this, the number of phone calls has not decreased. Simpler cases are now often managed online, at the same time as more phone calls come from people needing guidance on how to use such online services. The conclusion is that digitalization represents good management of central government resources. Nevertheless, the opportunity to contact agencies by phone and at a physical office is still important and must not be forgotten. I think these are a couple of simple examples of questions that need to be taken into account in the continued digitalization process. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, Martin Luther King said, coming back to the theme of light and darkness where I started, Martin Luther King said, "Only in the darkness can you see the stars." Right now, our need for hope and light is perhaps greater than usual, both thinking of the pandemic and thinking of the global trends of deteriorating democracy around the world. But we can all take comfort in the fact that light will return to our societies. In the long run, I am convinced that light is always more powerful than darkness. Democracy is facing challenges, but we all have to do our utmost to defend it, and I do think that we will prevail. I'm hopeful in that regard. So let us together continue to develop our countries and the global security along a path built on the cornerstones of democracy, because in unsettled times, democracy is the beacon of light that can guide us through the darkness. Thank you.